welcome to the Telluride Final Review. This is my final chapter of Telluride versus, well, I guess versus SCX10 in a crawling environment. Do they stack up as a trail rig? You know, well, we'll get into that in a minute. First of all, got a new background. I'm just testing the color. I'm thinking navy blue. It's a little better than just the white with the banner. People probably thought I was sponsored by Futaba. That couldn't be further from the case. I just happen to like their radios, really. So I thought, yeah, I'll, throw this up there just to make sure that, oops, my chair. There we go. I'll throw that, just threw the banner up there, just to have something in between these two racks over here. Just, I don't know, just to make it more visually appealing. But I think this is probably gonna work out better. So I'm gonna probably use that. But the biggest thing is the improvement to the sound. We have a new microphone. Yeah, I went out and bought a new microphone this last weekend. Been trying that out. It sounds a whole lot better. Anyway, let's tear into our Telluride. Now, one of the things, the biggest change that I made, and a lot of people were asking me, what did you do to the Telluride to make it work? So we're gonna go through that, okay? Then I'm gonna give you my final thoughts. First thing I did was change the wheels and tires, okay? These are still short course wheels. You can probably see we got a 3-inch inner diameter. These wheels are actually from the, where did these come off? These are Team Associated KMC Hex wheels from the new SC10, SC10 4x4. What they've done is narrowed this up significantly, probably around 3/4 of an inch, I would say, is how much they affected our track width. It brought the tires in quite a bit more. If you remember the original Telluride, the fender flare here only covered like an 1/8 inch or maybe a 1/4 inch of the tire. Now we're covering at least half. When you suck that right down onto it, it's covering, more than half of the tire. So I think total we probably narrowed it up at least 3/4 of an inch, if not an inch. I didn't measure it. I probably should have. One of the things that I was really impressed, these are Proline Trencher X's. This is the Trencher X short course tire, and they have an extremely good profile. You've got a large block with a smaller block in between of different heights on the outer edges. Of course, the inner edge, the inner line of the tire, there's these different sight blocks. These blocks are nicely spaced, gives the tire good traction. Very soft. This rubber compound is excellent. I was impressed with these. In fact, I was so impressed, I've ordered another set of tires. We're gonna try this on an SCX10. We've got to do some tire testing on these because I gotta play with these a little bit more. They were not scuffed in very well when I went out there. We just started running this truck, and I mean, they were performing really well. So that's something to keep in mind. The foam I'm using is it's the HPI soft short course foam, okay? So it's very squishy. It'll mold nicely to the rocks and obstacles, but being that it's a short course wheel, it's not too mushy. It really tracks well. The tire doesn't roll over on itself and that sort of thing, being that these wheels are the shape that they are. The next thing I've done is tweak the differentials. And what I used was a product called, it was actually from Racer's Edge. It's a product called Diff Locking Putty. Now when I started out, this truck would not, just by turning the one wheel, the entire drivetrain wouldn't turn. It just diffed out. When I started crawling, I had this packed pretty well. I didn't want it completely locked, so I got it feeling the way I wanted it, put it together, went out and crawled it. And just in that crawling, it's broken that in. So what I would need to do, because it's still, now it's not as stiff as it was. It is, it's fairly stiff, a lot stiffer than stock, but you need to do it again. I think I've never used that product before. The diff putty, it's not like silly putty, it's a different feel. But now that it's broken in, I'd have to take that diff apart. I think we'd have to put a little bit more back in it and pack it in nicely. And then I think you'd be good for a while. If I can on something, I'll do more testing on that. But for that one run, I mean, it worked pretty well. As you saw in the video, it was gripping pretty nicely. It's still an open differential, but definitely more limited slip now. I mean, it's turning the entire drivetrain. So that was one of the key things to make it perform as well as it did out on the rocks. The next thing I did, this car has, well, I put a clear gear cover here just because I like that, so you can see if anything gets into the gears. But stock gearing on this car is a 12-tooth pinion and a 83-tooth spur gear. Okay, now they're 48 pitch, so they're a little bit quieter, they're a little smoother. As you know, the Stampede 4x4 and the Slash, they are 32 pitch gears, but this one, Traxxas decided to go with a 48 pitch. Now, the problem is for crawling. As you've seen in, I think it was Ultimate, Jang did a video where he was on the rocks for, I don't know, 5 minutes, and he burned the motor up. The stock motor that comes in this, the 12 turn, I mean, if you saw from the speed video, this thing got up to 30 miles an hour. The fact is, that's too fast for a crawler. If your vehicle can go that fast, you're gonna have trouble crawling it adequately, and you probably will burn the motor out. The reason for that is this car is geared fairly high. Even though it's 12-tooth pinion, 83-tooth spur, it's still kind of a race car gearing. It's not like an axial where you have a centered transmission that's basically a transfer case as a gear reduction, and then you've got your axles. This has a pinion, a spur gear, and the differentials. Where your SCX10 has a pinion, a spur gear, a gear reducing transmission with an internal ratio of 2.6 out to the differentials, which are 3-to-1. So quite a lot higher gearing here, okay? So if you're gonna be serious about trying to crawl this thing, you've got to change the motor. You're gonna be burning that up. Now, if you don't want to go brushless, like I didn't, I wanted to try and keep, you know, mostly stock, you're going to have to pick a slower motor. I am borrowing this motor. This is a 45 turn Integy. You can see there, it's one of their nicer ones. It's not the cheapest one, but being a 45 turn motor, it doesn't have the RPM. It doesn't have the high speed power band that the Titan 12 and a lot of the other motors have. It's a very low RPM, high torque motor specifically for crawling. And what that's done is, because it doesn't have a lot of RPM and because it has a lot of torque, it has helped to overcome the deficiency for crawling that's in this drivetrain. Okay, so I would estimate top speed with this motor is probably 11, 12 miles an hour max. You know, it really is not very fast, but it crawls well. And while I was out there on the rocks, this motor didn't even hardly get warm. I mean, it was fine. So I've lost speed, but I've gained crawlability doing this brushed motor. Now you could use a 35 turn. I think you could get away with a 35 turn. This 45 turn worked great on 2S. If you were going to go with a brushless system that you wanted to make it crawlable but still have some speed, you could do something like, I was thinking in my head, you know, one of those Rock 412 motors with a Tican RS or a Mama Max Pro speed controller. A Tican Rock 412, probably something like a 2500 kV, even on a 2-cell would work really well with this. How did we feel about it? Oh, I almost forgot one other thing. The last modification I did, I just dropped this body like 2 clicks on the posts, front and rear, just to get it a little bit more hunkered down looking. Just drop that body because the body was clear up, you know, and to plant this thing down a little bit more. And I wasn't having any rubbing, real noticeable rubbing issues anyway. Worked well. All right, so how did it do? Well, how do we feel about it? I had my doubts, but I wasn't as negative as some of the guys in the club compared to their SCX10s. I had everybody that showed up drive this, at least for a section, to see what they thought of it. And initially, when they heard I was doing this, a couple of guys in the club really weren't too, I mean, they didn't really have a lot of faith. In fact, one of them literally said something like, that's going to be the biggest, most ill-handling hunk of you-know-what that I've ever seen. And we got it out there on the trail, and we were driving it, and they were blown away. I mean, they were not prepared for how well it did and how well it kept up with them. No, it wasn't as good as the SCX10, but it did pretty well. I mean, it drove really well, and let's say this, they were impressed. To the point that they actually admitted, yeah, that's a pretty good car. With the modifications that have been done, this thing could do it. Will it work as well as an SCX10, or would you want to buy one? Well, that depends. I think we unanimously agreed it's capable, it's a fun machine, it's priced under $300, it's not very capable out of the box and not very well set up for crawling or scale trail driving like that. If you were interested in this, it's what we determined this to be kind of the perfect kid vehicle. You got family members, kids that want to come out with you. You don't have to spend a lot of money on setting this one up, and you don't care about it. I mean, they can go out and mess around with it, and they're not going to break it. Or if they do break it, you're not worried about it. It's not your very expensive competitive rig. It's the perfect camp machine. Excuse me. Perfect camp machine to take camping, to goof off, let family members drive it, and you're not worried about it. So, I mean, that aspect of it is really nice. There's just one problem with it. We can't really, seem to get past. Price-wise, you are $299 right now for this one. And right now, you can buy one of these for Honcho is like $354, okay, something like that. I think is their map price. They're $3.50. Now, obviously, you could probably get a little better deal on either one of them, but basically, there's $50 difference. Either way you slice it. If you don't want to go fast, if you want a faster trail ride that you're jumping off the logs and stuff, okay, this one's for you. But if you wanted a more competitive, slower, harder terrain vehicle without any modifications or very little modification, this guy's for you. It's $50 more, but I think it's money well spent. Okay, so that's my opinion on these two. That's what I got to say about that. Until next time, happy motoring.